Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Helping Hand, a webinar looking at the emerging tools and practices that we can use as professionals at this really so challenging time in our pupils' careers and in our careers. We're really privileged today to be joined by some fantastic practitioners, Tristan Williams, Sarah Dove, and Marius Frank. I do hope that you gain a lot from the next hour. We will have some time at the end for some questions. And of course, as usual, all the questions that you do put in, we will respond to offline as well. Please also give us feedback as to how you think the webinar went. So what I'll do now is put you straight over to Tristan Williams.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're feeling as positive and comfortable in yourselves as possible. Now, before I pass over to our formal guests for today, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background on what we've been doing in the city of Bristol. Now, my trust, I'm fortunate enough to have the responsibility over all the primary schools and all the specialist settings. Altogether in the trust, we've got over 5,000 children and just over 800 staff members. And the greatest challenge for us at the moment is to deliver to the most, disadvantaged children and some of the most complex young people in the city. And I have touched on this previously, but I do think it needs to be said that you, as educationalists, are real heroes. You are going way above and beyond, not just to educate young people, but actually going above and beyond to make sure that families, that communities, that their needs are met. We're providing more help through medical means, through social care means, and even feeding our families. And that really, really does need to be celebrated. And some of the greatest challenges that we have been facing is the support of our most vulnerable, our children with those additional needs. And if I just use that terminology of the 3Ds, the disadvantaged, those children who live in deprivation, and also emphasize on the D of the disability within the SEND. And keep on revisiting that process of who are our priority children. We keep on having ethical, authentic conversations about actually the priority children pre-COVID and now during COVID is a very, very different landscape. So as professionals in school, do you really know who those priority children are? Who those priority children might be tomorrow, next week, or next month? And one key area that I'm a big advocate of is ensuring that the well-being of our students and staff members is our priority during these tough and challenging times. Now, resilience isn't something that you have or you don't have. To me, it is situation specific. It will rise and fall depending on factors that contribute to stress. Conversations that we keep on having with our colleagues are saying, actually, this academic year, I'm not feeling work-related stress. I'm feeling heightened levels of anxiety. Terminology such as trauma are being used ethically and authentically because those are the kinds of feelings that my colleagues are already feeling. So the key focus for myself and colleagues over the last few weeks, and as we look at a half-term break, but also more importantly, looking forward into term 2, is that we reach out and we use those relationships that we have with our young people to cushion the challenges of returning back to school again. We keep on focusing on the well-being and the recovery intervention programs. It's crucial that we understand where our children are at and where our children will have those additional support and interventions, which includes well-being and academic interventions moving into term 2. And that as educationists, we address these gaps, consulting and co-constructing with our students. How often do we as educationists truly capture the voice of the child? Well, now it's even more important than ever. How do our children feel in school? How do our children feel about the challenges going into the darker winter months? Do we understand how they feel within their home communities? Do we understand how they feel with their parents and the situation at home or carers? But we keep on asking those questions in safe environments, in safe spaces. And then we teach our children about emotional intelligence. We provide time for that, and that the power of emotions and the growth, survival, a continuum. You know, there is hope at the end of every challenging situation, and together as a team, we will get there. And I think it's crucial that we keep on reinforcing those points. We provide space to rediscover self and to find the inner voices on learning about these issues. And we make the skills for learning explicit for students to reskill and rebuild their confidence as learners. And we keep on revisiting these points. One key area I'm extremely proud of what we've achieved, especially through the blended learning with our young people. And, you know, we'll move on to Marius and Sarah, who are much, you know, greater expertise than I have in this particular area. But actually, what the young people have told me is that the move from learning in class to being educated at home was too much of a step last time. So the young people have fed back that they learn and obtain feedback through face-to-face lessons and online. And what they've been asking for is, could they have some blended learning happening in school on a regular basis? So we have looked at our year sixes, we've looked at year 11s, and we've looked at year 13s. And what we've put into place is that there's at least one lesson on a daily basis with our year sixes, year 11s, and year 13, which is actually online. So we may well have teaching assistants in the classes with our children, but the teachers will teach the lesson through the computer in a completely different part of the school. So our young people are feeding back to us that is a really positive step, that the online learning either prepares me for the lesson or extends my learning from the lesson. And that kind of feedback, again, is really, really important. We're fully aware of those children that don't have the devices at home. We've got them in place. We've been promised a variety of things from the DfE, and actually we can't control that. But what we have done is that we've gone out to sponsors, we've gone out to personal businesses, and in the last week or so, we've been fortunate enough, we've had just over 280 additional laptops delivered that we'll be taking out to our most vulnerable families as we go into term 2. My key point on that is that we can criticise DfE, or we can do our utmost to control who we're talking to and who we're looking for that additional sponsorship. So the blended learning moving forward is that the teachers are fed back, is that the chosen model needs to be appropriate for the subject and for that unit of work. The existing schemes of work may need to be deconstructed and put back together. The subject leads need to be making the pedagogical decisions for blended learning. And if teachers are aware of these decisions they are more likely to share these decisions with the students. I've touched on well-being. We have implemented, again, Thrive assessments, and please feel free to Google, and I'm sure lots of you out there understand what Thrive is. And actually, Thrive assessments underpin every personalised learning programme that we've got for all our children right across the trust. We understand at what emotional and social stage all our children are at. All our pastoral team have additional training in becoming TRIM practitioners, which is trauma risk management, so they can see those trigger factors in our staff members. And resilience is a skill. It can be practiced, and with practice, it will improve. But one key point I'm going to finish before I introduce you to Sarah Dove is that we feel as leaders, we need to do even more to support the well-being of our students. We also need to do more to support the well-being of our staff members. So all our staff members across the Venturers Academy, which is the special school, will be undertaking what's called a basic resilience programme that will run for between 5 and 7 months. And as part of that is the term basics. So we cover aspects of biology and breathing. A, which is attitude and active reflection. S is self-care. I is inner control. C is circuit breakers. And S is social support, and empathetic leadership. And what we've done for the last 7 months is that we've worked with a company called Extreme Leaders, who have a wealth of psychologists, but also people that have been elite sports people and also elite military. And what we've done is that we've amended this program to make it more education based. And staff members have already bought into this process. So colleagues, invest in yourselves, invest in the well-being of your colleagues, because if we don't do that, I don't think we can deliver at the appropriate level for the young people who we care for so passionately. Now I'm going to take my slide down, and I have the pleasure of introducing the main one of our guests. I believe that Sarah is starting to share the content. Sarah, thank you ever so much for joining us today. It's an absolute privilege to have you with us. Now, Sarah is a qualified teacher who has worked in senior leadership roles in the British education system for the last 19 years, particularly interested in the work with children, the margins of education, those young people on the verge of exclusion, medical needs, and special needs. He's also the president of the National Organisation for Pro and Alternative Provision, got a master's in inclusive education, and currently studying and getting there to finish also a PhD. You also host a popular Kids COVID mental health on Twitter, which I think is great. I'm going to follow you after this, and I'm going to follow the hashtags too, Sarah. It's wonderful. And you are the founder of Phoenix Education and the co-creator of Reintroduction Hub, supporting children returning to school. Sarah, it's an honour to have you with us, and I'm sure that all colleagues listening in today will certainly enjoy the next 20 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and it was really interesting to hear what you've been doing within your own school. The title of this webinar, actually probably aware, is A Helping Hand, and really about consideration of different resources and how these might be used on focusing better on supporting the well-being of our children as they re-engage with education. As I was introduced, my name is Sarah Dove. You can follow me on Twitter if that's the sort of thing you like to do, but I'm also going to signpost you to some of those resources that I'm going to be talking about today. The hub in itself can be found at thereintroductionhub.com, and if you wish to register, just do a /register. You can also email me or download free teacher resources at thereintroductionhub.co.uk, so please feel free to do that. So firstly, I'm going to give you a bit of background information on the web-based app, the Reintroduction Hub, and how it came into fruition. In May, there was exceedingly overwhelming, I would say, discussions around children not being at school in the UK and how this might affect their return to school, what would help them and what would enable their recovery. During that time, I've been hosting, as discussed at the introduction, a kids' COVID mental health chat online in response to COVID-19. And in a sense, what unified all children's experiences was absolutely nothing at all. Some children really enjoyed being at home. Some had suffered bereavement. Some had felt like the loss of friendships was a real big issue. Some had really enjoyed the time they got to spend with their parents, for example. Essentially, every child's experience was different. And I considered about what this might mean for teachers and senior leaders in school, and what a huge response it would be in terms of providing a collective response for children returning to school. As part of this thinking, what I noticed is that very few people would actually ask children themselves about what their experiences were of not going to school. So I initiated a survey across England, and I thought that maybe 5, 10, 15 children would participate. In 2 weeks, I had over 2,000 children who had responded and told me what they thought about what a right return might look like and what things they thought would help them. And as part of this conversation, we thought we need something that is nuanced and personalised for children and to support teachers when children return to school. And we had lots of conversations and thoughts around the term recovery hub or reintroduction hub. And part of my thinking around working with children for the last X amount of years is that not all children would be recovering from trauma, but actually some children might need to be reintroduced to the schooling environment instead. I thought that children needed to be reintroduced to their friendships, their learning, as well as considering their physical and mental health needs and the things that might have changed during lockdown. For us, we wanted to build a bridge between knowing what had happened to them at home and what would help children return to school, whilst valuing their different experiences. We wanted to ensure that teachers were with tools and resources to not just measure well-being when children returned, but to be given actual resources they could use on a day-to-day basis. As a result of this, the Reintroduction Hub came into fruition, and we developed measurements of well through individual students using what we thought were quick-fire, low-stake quizzes, and these were set against 12 frameworks, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. And these were 12 frameworks which we felt were impacted potentially about COVID-19 and tried to understand them more. But rather than just assuming, for example, resilience, as Tristan talked to a little bit earlier, you don't just have it, you can develop it, it changes, it's contextual, just like the same idea about our 12 frameworks. So, for example, one of our frameworks that we have a range of different questions on is the concept of threat. So if you imagine that actually some children may feel really threatened, their perception of threats might be incredibly high, and that might be because they have underlying anxiety, because they've known that someone has become unwell, for example, compared to another child who actually has a very low perception of threat from COVID-19, and then compare to the reality of that threat. So some children may have seen and experienced COVID-19 directly through bereavements, through family members becoming unwell, that they might have a high perception of threat reality relating to COVID-19. And depending on what their answers are, in the low-stake quizzes, they are given targeted resources to be able to respond to. In order to access the hub itself, we are providing free registration. So have a look at the reintroductionhub.com/register, and that will give you an opportunity to look around and have a go at it. And as I said, it's targeted resources depending on the answers. Now, the 12 frameworks cover these areas. So I mentioned threat, but how a child might identify in terms of how they think about themselves in relation to the pandemic. Also, their academic profile. So how do they feel they connect to education? And one big thing that we've been talking about a lot, and within my experience of working in education for a number of years, is this idea of regulation. How much are children able to regulate their own emotions and make sure it doesn't spill out into the classroom? Or if they're worried or upset, how able are they able to tell adults around them? And these 12 frameworks carry on throughout the hub, and under each framework is targeted resources that children might wish to use. Now, the functionality of the hub in itself is, you can see, in terms of registering, it's very, very simple. We ask for limited information, and I'll talk about why that is in a moment. But it's your first name, your surname, your email address, and that provides your username to be able to access the web-based resource. And with that, as a teacher or a senior leader or pastoral support, whatever role you're in, you can then see all the individual students that you want to add onto the hub. And the students themselves have their own dashboard where they're able to take a quiz and they're able to view their resources. They are also provided with a different character that they're most like. So, for example, this child, who I call Panda for the virtue of this webinar, is Crosby the crocodile. And that's because storytelling has become a really important feature of some of the work that we've been doing within Phoenix Education Consultancy. So rather than just saying, oh, you know, you're really angry right now, we might explore that anger through Crosby the crocodile. Oh, Crosby the crocodile, sometimes we notice gets really angry in class. I wonder what that's about and how we might help Crosby can feel more distance and a more useful tool for children that are really struggling with their emotional regulation. As you can see, we also have a teacher's dashboard where you can view all your students. You can invite students by email, and you can register a student as well. But you can also monitor well-being over time. So under each of the frameworks, the questions, you're given a score. Now, if you were to look at the top, you can see that the child, monitoring well-being over time, the child who's undertaken Panda has undertaken the threat quiz a number of times, because that's obviously something that really concerns them. And they have shifted a little bit in terms of how their worries and concerns about COVID-19. And that's shown by the traffic light colour coding system, where red is something that the teacher really needs to target and focus on. Green, actually, the young person seems to be doing really well. And amber, maybe a little bit of work. But you can keep on redoing the quizzes, and as a teacher, see how the young person is responding. Now, what we recommend is perhaps do the quizzes every 6 weeks, but also if you're in the UK, you may be acutely aware that certain areas are having an increased intervention from governments and different tiers of lockdown, for example. So just around the corner from me, we're in a tier 2 lockdown, which restricts some of our activities. If in Manchester, which is really struggling at the moment as well, you might want to see the impact that those political struggles are having on the children within your class environment. So you might say, well, it's not quite 2 weeks, 6 weeks yet, but we're going to ask the children to complete the quiz early because we want to see what the impact is on their emotional well-being. Or it might be something that you've noticed and you really want to explore more in depth with the children. And you can monitor that over time. So you can see whether or not the resources or further kind of context for that child is having an impact on their well-being. The things that I mentioned in terms of registration is we ask for very little information, and that is intentional to make sure that GDPR, that we're not retaining lots of information that isn't important and isn't essential for the work that we're doing. Instead, we have very limited information, and we also have a privacy statement as part of the hub as well that you can access and look at. And information is processed anonymously as well. Now, in terms of safeguarding, one of the questions that we're routinely asked about, what happens if we're worried about a child? Now, we respond to the Department of Education's Keeping Safe in Education document of making sure that information is passed on. Now, what we would say is that you need to ensure that you're working within your school policies regarding safeguarding. But what we've done as part of our reintroduction hub is made sure that we've signposted different organisations throughout the hub. So, for example, Childline, that works with children in terms of their emotional well-being, but also Papyrus, that is often seen as London-based for children with self-harm or suicidal ideation. And we also talk about share with a trusted grown-up. If you're worried or concerned, share with a trusted grown-up. But as the teacher has oversight of the children's well-being, they can see, oh, actually, there seems to be quite a big dip in their emotional well-being. Like lots of the things feel like they're red now, whereas they were amber. I'm going to talk with this young person and find out a little bit about what's going on to support them. Now, in terms of resources, so the young person completes some questions, and they can do the framework separately as well. And that's especially important for children that might have low attention or primary school, or just trying to encourage them to complete it, is they can do a framework at a time, but they're given different resources that are targeted for them. And we've made them beautiful. I'm sure you agree. And these are examples of different resources under the threat framework. It's just a small sample to give you an idea about some of the different resources that might come in. So I mentioned that child, for example, had a really high perception of threat relating to COVID-19. They're really, really worried about it. You can imagine, for example, your 9-year-old girl that absolutely insists, quite rightly so, I would say, on wearing a mask, but also is affecting their emotional well-being. They don't want to go out. They don't want to go to school. They're really worried about mum going out, for example. But their reality of COVID-19 is low. So they would be given a resource which is built on the CBT approach around the anxiety detective that you can see there. So what is their anxious thought? What is the shortcut? And what might be a more helpful thought? But then also imagine perhaps it might even be the same age child who has a real low perception of COVID-19. They're not bothered about it. And actually you have to keep on asking them to wear the mask. And, oh, you need to make sure you wash your hands. So they're given make a reminder badge, for example, resource. Or there's some resources that we say actually are great for any children at any time, and that's what's termed a universal resource. So they will be populated in the children's framework, and you might want to do them within the overall class. So, for example, this one is grounding techniques. In terms of the use of the resources, what we would say is the first thing you need to introduce the hub, show that young people how to use it, but it's quite simple. We've tried to keep it point and click as much as possible. And you might want to just have answering a framework in class as a starter activity, or potentially if you're really worried about a particular cohort, a particular group of children, then what I would say is that you work with that child individually or a small group. Otherwise, I would say as a starter activity, 15 minutes to introduce the hub. And children themselves can then review the resources and share the resources. Oh, you've got this resource, but I've got this one. And they can have that exploration. And the idea is that these are self-contained activities that might be supported with a teacher, a pastoral leader, family liaison worker, or even that this child can use this resource because they can log in at home and show their parents and carers about, oh, this is what I've got. Maybe we can do it together. You can do these within one-to-one sessions or within wider groups. It depends on the nature of your class. So I would say that as a teacher, if you notice that a lot of your children are really struggling with their emotional regulation, now you will probably see that within class, but you'll see it within the quizzes, for example, that they'll all be read, is you might say, actually, I really want to focus on this. Or you might find that lots of children are having difficulty with their friendship groups, and there's lots of activities and resources that support children in thinking about friendships. So you can do these within discrete sessions or within the wider support for school. In terms of the next steps, this is in local authorities right now, and the great thing is that we're creating more resources at the moment, and we're now at the stages, I think today, is where we've divided it into primary and secondary resources, and that's because we really wanted to make sure that children with special needs, for example, were able to access some of this support, but also so that we could target older children and really make sure the resources reflected their age and stage. And what we're also looking at now is proof of concept. So how effective and how well is this working? So we're collating lots of case studies and feedback from local authorities and groups of organisations that are taking this up. Some of our frequently asked questions is how much does it cost? So at the moment, I have self-funded this. So pioneer, what I call pioneer local authorities, that people that want to access the reintroduction hub on a long-term basis, if they sign up before December, they get a massively reduced cost. And your local authority or your care commissioning group, for example, or your multi-academy trust will be able to use it within all of their provisions and without an additional cost. After December, after Christmas, it becomes more expensive. People ask about whether or not you'd use it in a one-to-one or in groups, and I would suggest actually you know your cohort better, so you know whether or not a child will be able to manage talking about more challenging aspects in a bigger setting than others. And one thing is around how can I use it to measure a child's well-being? I would say every 6 weeks, but keep returning to it if you think there's a change or you're concerned about a young person's well-being, or if there's a change politically in what's going on across what's happening in the world. So I just want to say a big thank you. If you've got any feedback or if you've got any thoughts, then please feel free to contact me and I will answer as soon as possible. I'm nicely going to hand back over to Tristan now.
Sarah, wonderful. I feel much lighter in myself after that. That's great. The tremendous work that you're doing with all your colleagues, having an impact on so many young people across the nation. Well done. Absolutely inspiring stuff. Thank you. Our next guest today, I bumped into Marius a few years ago. Marius, I almost said many years ago, but that would almost give the game away, and I'm not ageist, obviously. And I was undertaking an assembly, and we even had a bit of a sing-song, Marius. So I have tempted Marius to sing at the end of the session, but we'll see. We might keep that one in our back pocket. But Marius, you like Sarah, you are an incredible, professional and human being, and You know, the amount of lives that you've touched over your time in education also is superb. And Marius is currently the strategic lead for e-learning development for youth justice at Achievement for All. He's had an incredible career as a teacher of science, music and expressive arts, middle leader, including posts as head of year, head of science, as a director of music, and also you work, Marius, in a similar area to where I am at the moment. The Bedminster Down School in Bristol, in one of the most deprived areas in the city, and despite being named in the bottom 200 performing school secondary in the country in year 2000, you led the school. I know, Marius, and these words ring true. Absolutely remarkable transformation, trebling performance outcomes in a decade, despite those low community expectations. And Marius has also been the chief executive of Asdan Education, and I'm sure you've all heard of Asdan. And at the time, they won Human Resource Magazine Most Person-Centered CEO of the Year award in 2011, before eventually joining Achievement for All in 2015. Marius, like Sarah, you are an incredibly busy man helping so many nationally. It's an honour and a privilege to have you here today, and I know that everybody listening and watching will be uplifted once more following your presentation. Thank you, Marius.
Oh, thank you very much, Tristan, and what a build-up. Thank you so much. Now, I think, Sarah, you have to stop sharing your presentation before I can share mine. So I wonder if you could... here we go. I think I'll be all right now. I think we're going to get somewhere. Fantastic. Here we go. So hopefully, and if Tristan can confirm, everyone can see my my screen. My name's Marius Frank, as Tristan quite rightly reminded me. I've been in my shed here since March, working on behalf of our Achievement for All schools. And I can echo everything Sarah said, everything about how schools are being challenged, how young people and their families across the world are being challenged by something that was unforeseen and unprecedented. And schools are responding in great ways. What I'll do today is just sort of practice and rehearse, if you like, some of the permissions we have as professionals to do things differently, to look at approaches and resources to re-engage families and rebuild learning communities. Tristan testified to some amazing work within his learning communities. And you can have quite intensive programs, or you can have little drip feeds. If you just nudge your way towards a key principle, you will make a difference. And that key principle is this: put well-being at the heart of learning and leadership. Put well-being at the heart of learning and leadership. And you don't actually need much money or a lot of training to do that. This is a picture from one of our schools, Kensington Primary School in Newham. And they've grown the emotional intelligence of their entire school community. So now it's all right to tell someone how you're feeling. It's okay and permissive to talk about feelings. And boy, that's one of the first steps you can make in the staff room, in the classroom, and on the phone to parents. So I'll be going on now to talk about the impact, if you like, of lockdown and how we can respond to it. Now, we know that lockdown has had a disproportionate impact on the most vulnerable and the most disadvantaged. As early as April last year, we were finding that only 5% of the most vulnerable and disadvantaged children stayed engaged with formal learning during lockdown. Families didn't engage with the school offer, look, for a variety of reasons. In some areas, it was because they didn't have a good relationship with the school. In others, it was because they were simply overwhelmed coping with the realities of lockdown. Connections were lost with key workers. There was a lack of routines and structures, a lot of motivational loss. You know, what's the point of all of this? And a regression of social skills and formal learning skills, and actually exploiting that. We know of some behavior in some pupil referral units and alternative provision where young people would come in and deliberately spit at staff simply to go back to the unstructured world that they were living in, not because they disliked the teachers. It was a personal statement of their stress and their fragility. So, have we got the courage, the support, the ideas and the tools to reignite learning, to re-motivate learners and re-engage with even the hardest to reach families? I use the term re because so many schools had made that progress and it was lost in a heartbeat. Do we need to do something different? And do we need to have a different type of curriculum intent and implementation to have a different impact? I use the terms intent, implementation, and impact because in England, our Ofsted framework is now talking about curriculum intent, implementation, and impact. Because at last we have a situation whereby there's a reality that one size of education doesn't fit all. And what we're finding is inspections are now focusing on the provision for individual young people or groups of young people. The curriculum is a framework, and the framework has to have an intent. Schools have to manage that intent with a structure and a narrative to have an implementation structure. What do the teachers and the learners do? And then that implementation has to be evaluated. What knowledge and skills have been gained? Intent, implementation, impact. So, what should the post-COVID curriculum for some young children and young people be? And I'm talking about post-COVID because it's the here and now, and it's the next 12 months, maybe even 18 months. And you don't see progress in English and maths on my diagram here. You don't see measurements of academic learning. The intent for some will be a reintegration into formal learning, a re-establishing the purpose of formal learning. What is the purpose of what they're doing? Social and emotional learning. And Sarah and Tristan have told you that already is so important for some young people. Reconnecting with families, building those learning partnerships again. Building or rebuilding a confidence, a resilience, and a motivated learner. And finally, of course, identifying, acknowledging, celebrating, and rewarding small step success, which will breed further success. So really, let's look at the curriculum or reward or progress in an entirely different way. Let's just turn it on the head. And what I'm going to do is present with you two tools which are freely available. This one is available as a PowerPoint diagrammatic, which I'm sure Paul, Drew, and Tristan will have available to all of you to use. We call it the Progress Star. And I'll also tell you a little bit about the Achievement for All core strength plan as well. So what is our Progress Star? What are we trying to do with this? Well, what we're trying to do is bring a communication tool alive to young people and some parents and carers who themselves might have low literacy, low communication skills, and struggle to engage in academic language. The Progress Star is just designed to communicate a sense of progression and achievement in a simple, visual, easy to understand format. And the recording sheet, which you can see just below the Progress Star, does exactly the same, just in a different format. It can be linked, of course, to education plans or EHCPs, or it could be used for any young person to record and monitor learning outcomes towards particular goals. There happen to be 5 elements to the star, which actually coincide really well with a new engagement curriculum that might be replacing some of the early steps of SEND assessment that's existed in the UK, but it can be used for anything. But within each one of those legs of the star, there are 3 boxes. Now, what I have here is an example of what may go in one of those elements of the star. Here we have a young person, maybe on the autistic spectrum, maybe have some communication difficulties, maybe traumatized, might be a young person impacted by the forces of migration, for example, and as having real difficulty to integrate into classroom and social settings. So 3 small steps. First of all, step 1, look at a person who's talking to you. Second, look at the person you are talking to. And then step 3, keep eye contact with someone all the way through a conversation. Now, we're very good at sometimes setting these targets, but sometimes communicating them to young people and parents can be hard. I think the STAR framework enables that to happen quite nicely. Each of the steps can be articulated in the STAR, and what's wonderful is then you co-construct a way of recording progress. You can use a different line or a different color to represent when these behaviors are seen consistently at school and essential and critical, first observed or consistently observed at home. Parents, carers, and learners and teachers could all co-construct a progress grid together. And in this example, for example, it looks like, oh, look, black lines on outcome 2 and outcome 4 all the way through. Brilliant. But we've got a bit of a way to go in the other outcomes. And so this document, nearly there, on its way, or achieved, can be used as a wonderful visual representation with parents, with carers, and above all, the children. It can be personalized, so you can lob a picture of the young person right at the heart of each star. It can be designed to be printed in A4, A3 formats, can be used in the classroom with parents and carers, online, ways of celebrating progress. You can have star assemblies where kids bring their personal stars along and display it in celebration. Praise, recognition, and small step progress. The targets could be academic. The targets could be personal. That's one tool we'd like to introduce you to, and you're free to use it. Another resource we've developed is something that we call core strength. Now, so many young people find access to a fully academic curriculum a huge challenge. A huge challenge because as some of them grow older, they don't see a relevance to it. They don't connect with it. I remember some young people, when I was a head teacher, when they got into trouble, they'd say things like, well, Mr. Frank, you know, knowing what the inside of a plant looks like ain't going to get me an effing job, is it? I'm sure Tristan has those conversations with some of his young people every day. But sometimes young people, even from an early age, need something more. They need the building blocks, the foundations in order to study effectively. So we've come up with a concept of core strength. We've appropriated it from the gymnasium and the elite professional sports person. But we describe core strength as the confidence and ability to learn, develop, and participate in society. It's part of our mantra about putting well-being at the heart of learning, the confidence and ability to learn, develop, and participate in society. The framework is designed so that formal learning in the classroom, non-formal learning in after-school clubs and in, say, community groups, and informal learning, say, within the family or from peers, can all contribute to the learning journey. It gives a common, easy-to-understand language of learning that can be used and applied in the home, in schools and in youth clubs and youth services. This is where we started to grow the work with a charity that did lunches over the summer in the Newcastle area for the most deprived young people. They used the core strength framework to put a bit of value and learning value into their activities. And we also have designed it to be progressive. So there's something for everyone from early years through primary into secondary and on into college, whatever level that there is something for someone. And of course, we've got downloadable record sheets, a small step reward sheets to just use and customize to your own professional appeal. So, what is our core strength framework? Okay, we cannot ignore and must not ignore the primacy of English and maths, but notice we don't call it necessarily just English and maths, because being literate and numerate we think should be perceived as basic human rights, and that should be the end of it. It's the gateway to employment and well-being and lifelong importance, but it's the use of English and maths that we're looking at. Some call it IT, some call it computer sciences. Look, whatever the label, digital literacy is a critical 21st century employment imperative. It's essential for living, and it has been totally essential due to COVID-19. And Tristan, I was so impressed by the way you were preparing young people for that digital journey. And I know some schools as well that have closed down for a day and practiced and rehearsed a lockdown with the pupils at school, digitally connecting to their teachers, taking away the anxiety and equipping them for the learning. A positive self-attitude is cited in nearly every business survey. Young people needing that positive approach to well-being and their lives, taking ownership of their learning. Now, in the old days, we used to talk about working with others, but actually managing relationships is a complex skill in one-to-one, one-to-many, many networks, and good leadership and good followership are interchangeable. The skill of managing information today is more important than ever. Think about every time you get a new mobile phone, you have to unlearn, relearn, and then new learn every time. Just in time learning, spotting the signal from the noise, spotting fake news. My goodness, it's an important skill today. The final one is creativity in context. It builds on problem solving and it encompasses initiative, enterprise, entrepreneurship, spotting and developing opportunities, vital today from shop floor to the boardroom. It translates into a 7 slice of pizza, a diagram, and we can plot the progress of young people through a learning journey from early years through to leaving school with GCSEs or the qualification of choice. We've adapted it for primary schools, and notice the change in language. So this is the reading, writing, speaking, listening, me, maths and me, building the best me. We've tested this out with 4, 6 and 8-year-olds, and they love that language because they can identify with it and internalize that language. And it's so simple to operate. 4 steps, and it's typical scaffolding, isn't it? Typical learning scaffolding. Make young people aware that they've got these competencies, catch them using it, acknowledge this, label it, validate it, give them opportunities to practice it and rehearse it in structured settings, apply with support, there's the scaffold, then take the scaffold away, encourage independent use, drive those young people forwards. Here are just 2 quick examples of activities which can be used to build, in this one, teamwork, other people and me, a bit of creativity, and a bit of maths. 4 young people selecting a route for a walking bus so they all arrive at school together. Lots of different routes, lots of main roads, risky areas. How do they solve the problem to get to school? Measuring time, looking at distances. So many activities in one open activity. And here's another COVID-friendly one, social distancing ball games. 5 players in each team. And the only rule is that 1 player at any one time can be in one of the boxes. So you give each team time to plan their strategy. You can appoint referees, invent new rules for the game, at least 4 passes before shooting, everyone a ref, everyone a timekeeper. You can build leadership skills, interactive learning skills, the works, just in one simple afternoon on the field with a few bits of ribbon and string. So look, that's all I've really got to say today. My message to you is oh so simple. Look into the hearts of your teachers, look into the hearts of your learners. We need to reinvent learning, not just for COVID, the immediacy of today, but for the next 12 to 18 months. We might need to fire up, if you like, learning in a slightly different way, and we may well need to reach our kids and our families in different ways. Be courageous. Be courageous, because if you are, and you re-engage and you put well-being at the heart of learning and leadership, the academic targets and the academic progress will follow. Once you get a copy of this presentation, you've got hot links to all of the resources you could possibly need, and also I hope a hot link to me, a bit like my BlackBerry. It's on 24 hours a day, and so am I. So I really would welcome, colleagues, the opportunity to talk to you all, share with you the journey that we've been on, and like Paul, like Sarah, like Dhruv, and Dave, look, we're all here to help and support you. So please, please, please get in touch if we can be of help. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Marius. Thank you for those key messages. I think there's a consistent theme coming through, Marius. Well-being is a key area that we all need to focus on, not just for now, but also the next 12, 18 months. And you never know, Marius, there's always positives that come out of traumatic experiences. And wouldn't it be wonderful that even the likes of your Ofsted in the future say and challenge leaders, how long did you focus on the well-being? Was it just over this period? But it needs to be central, and it is a human factor to education, isn't it? Sorry, Marius, I interrupted you there. Apologies.
Absolutely. Agreed, Tristan.
Well, we have some questions for Marius, for Sarah, and myself. So the first question is, there's a colleague interested in the way that our multi-academy trust in Bristol has approached the whole COVID situation. How was all that coordinated? Well, I've used the word co-production on many occasions this term. And as we were going from April into May into June, we were having additional forums for consultation and for the co-production of what we felt the schools needed coming into term 6 and into this academic year. And one thing that was clear was that certain schools had certain expertise that wanted to lead on certain projects, and other schools saying, well, that's not my expertise, but I'm happy to do this. So from a very fine audit process, again, not overly burdening colleagues, was that we knew exactly where our resources were at. In other words, we looked at a lead school who digitally were better than others, and they said, we will trial a variety of methods of blended learning. So over about 4 to 5 weeks, we trialed a variety of things. We trialed even coaching, mentoring online. So actually we had some evidence then to make things better. We're also incredibly fortunate that we now have a blended learning coordinator that is leading this project right across the trust. And also we've got a wonderful IT lead. So co-construction, I think, is important. Giving colleagues even more opportunities to tell us as leaders what's working and what's not, I think, is important. And always revisiting your core values, which is meeting the needs of the most vulnerable children as quickly as you can and deploying resources in the most appropriate way. Marius, a question for you. Any advice from you or any members of a team about working with other services that are clearly also under intense pressure at this particular time?
What a good question. What a good question. My advice really is actually to broker the relationship, but at a human level. Every single service that I know of is under intense pressure. I'm working with about 50 youth offending teams across the country. And also in our deep leadership role, one of the biggest blocks when people are under pressure is to actually understand what that service's key values or its aims are. Broker that relationship before you need them. Pick up the phone, have a conversation. The first question is, how are you feeling? And then you follow it up with, what are your priorities and how can we work together? Then when you pick up the phone again, the relationship will carry you through to a resolution rather than an anonymous email, another request to go into the inbox, and you know where that will go.
Absolutely, Marius. And, that's one thing I do say to all my colleagues. Please cut down on the emails, pick up the phone, have a video call. Because actually, Marius, I feel as if I'm connecting even better with you by seeing you rather than just talking to you. And I would connect even less with you as we do sometimes through Twitter because it's all the written text. And I think to be able to see and to hear colleagues, I think provides that emotional connection. And, I've had experiences, colleagues in a variety of multidisciplinary settings saying, do you realize how stressed I am and how much under pressure I am? And actually, my initial instinct is to say, so am I. But instead of saying that, reverse psychology, I flip it completely on its head and I just show even more empathy and even more kindness. And by showing that, the conversation has got more chance of ending up positively where agencies come together to resolve a complex issue. And we have to remember, what is a complex issue? It's usually to support that young person. So it's not a competition, it's not a battle, it's about coordinating, co-constructing, and even being more empathetic and kind than ever before. And consciously making that effort, I think, is crucial. Sarah, we have a question for you. And the question is, Sarah, do you have any thoughts about how to engage with parents and carers with the hub materials?
Yeah, so I would say that we know that parents understandably are anxious about their children returning to school. Some parents might be quite relieved, I was one of those parents, about their children returning to school. But also parents might have, some of our communities might be living in extended family settings as well, so actually their risks are heightened. So I would say that the Reintroduction Hub explores that in terms of asking questions about being clinically vulnerable, but in an age-appropriate way. Yeah. I would say that the children can access the hub at home and that they can see the resources together. And the idea is that you can absolutely, as it's on a PDF format and you can get it on your mobile phone, for example, without a major issue. Or you, as a teacher, you might want to print them off and send a little pack and go, we've been working in this area. And actually what we've noticed is that your little one is finding things difficult. What we think might be helpful is carrying on some of this work that we're doing in this setting at home as well. So I would say keep on extending that conversation. And I think what the Reintroduction Hub does, it recognises the fact that it is not as simple to say, and now you're going back to school. It recognises that the children would have had different experiences depending on a whole range of different factors at home.
Fantastic, Sarah. Wonderful. Wonderful. I do hope for everybody that's been part of the conversation here today that you feel that you're going to walk away with some new ideas, with some new concepts, and be inspired by some of the information that has been shared. Now, I am going to hand over to Paul Keenley's side just to finish off this session. But on behalf of myself, I'm Tristan Williams. On behalf of my trust, which is Venturous Trust, and everybody here today, a huge thank you for joining us. Thank you, Marius, for your time. Sarah, thank you for your time, and also the team at Nisai for giving us the opportunity to share our thoughts and ideas. And just one last point, Paul, before I finish. Keep on being kind, because by being kind, you're going to change a person's day. Please also be kind to yourself and make even more of an effort, because you too are precious. So I hope you've enjoyed the session today. And Paul, over to you for the closing remarks. Thank you, everybody.
I couldn't agree with you more, Trish, and that was kind of what I'm just going to wrap up with. Two main points. The first one is Nisai Education Trust was set up to look at innovation, to capture innovation in online and blended learning. And we've found, as we've moved through this COVID crisis, that emotion, well-being has absolutely got to be factored into our online lives. What I'd really like to do is to engage with everybody in a community of interest around that. So we'll be sending a link to everybody that's accessed this webcast, and inviting you to join that community of interest. We really want to hear about the exciting things that you're doing. You know, Tristan, Sarah, Maris, you're doing amazing things, but so is every single school out there. So we'll send you a link, and I do hope that you'll be able to engage with us about innovation and hope for our future. And then the other thing was that Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology, has always said that the thing that makes the greatest difference to your state of mind, and which enables you to look positively on the next day, is that if you write down 3 good things that happened in that day as you go to bed, every single day, day on day, then your outlook will remain positive. Now, I know a lot of people have started doing that, and a lot of people have started doing that again, including me. And I could just encourage you, it is such tough work out there. Everybody is amazing. Just think of 3 brilliant things every day, and hopefully we'll all get through this. So I'm looking forward to setting up their next webcast, and we'll all be in touch. I just want to say thank you to everybody who participated and everybody who's attended online. And I hope you have a great day.